Welcome to episode 5 of Untitled. I'm your host, Juwan. Any of the people that are wondering why I haven't dropped the interview in my regular time frame, our guest here today had to reschedule, so we had to push it back a little bit. But I did see you were in Vegas.
Yes.
What did you have going on out there?
So I went to Vegas for the first time to see Anita Baker, and it was wonderful. I was like, I have to go see her. I don't care where she's at. I'm going. So that's why I was there. And I just got back last week.
Was it like a personal trip?
Yeah.
Okay,
And I went with
nice.
my mom and my cousin, and we had a great time.
Okay. So I'm trying to think about where I particularly want to start with you. So you're like my first guest that I haven't had a personal relationship prior to like you coming. Everybody else I've known for plenty of years, where we've never even had a conversation, right? So something that I like to do, I'll go through, whoever I'm interviewing's Instagram, and I'll try to figure out just different stuff about them. And I want to ask you, what doesn't your Instagram tell me about you?
My Instagram probably doesn't tell you that I graduated from Kent State University. It does if you knew me or if you know me before. But if you look, at first glimpse, I think I might have it in my bio, but I just graduated in the spring from Kent State University with my degree in fashion merchandising and minor in marketing. What else does it not tell you? You may or may not gather that I love to roller skate. It depends on how far you went back. And pretty much that's it. I feel like my Instagram, I've had it for so long.
Right.
You might get a glimpse or my different phases of my life and my style. I don't know. So it depends on how far you go back.
Okay.
But those are the two things that stick out the most to me.
I went probably to what year did you go to college? 2017 or 16?
2016.
2016.
Yeah.
Okay, I went back as far as you were studying abroad.
Yeah.
I went back that far, but what I didn't see a lot of, and I don't have a lot of this on my Instagram either, is I didn't see a lot of childhood stuff.
Oh yeah. That was the other thing. I scrubbed my Instagram at one point, and it's hard to tell because I have so many pictures. But I used to be one of those ones who would post Throwback Thursdays all the time, and then in those instances, I would post my childhood photos. But now that I think about it, you don't really see a lot on my page.
Well, what I didn't do, I'll go back. I actually had a story attached to your name, which is why I didn't introduce you immediately.
Okay.
I was at the barbershop probably a week before the interview, and Daron Cooper. That's who cuts my hair. And we talk about, just personal stuff, barber, client. And he was like, so what you got going on? I was like, I got an interview soon. He was like, well, who? I was like, Jordan. She went to our school. He was like, Jordan who? And I was like, Jordan McCall. And he was like, I don't know who that is, bro. And I was like, yes, you do. And then he's like, you mean? And then he described you, and I told him what you were doing. So he was like, oh, you mean Jordan Bigelow?
Yeah.
I was like, well, that's the name on your Instagram, so I just assumed that was your last name.
Oh, no, Jordan Michael. That's my middle name.
Okay, Michael,
that's
my fault.
Middle name.
Okay.
So you were halfway there.
But to my Untitled viewers, we have Jordan Bigelow here, fashion designer, college graduate from Kent State. I would just describe you overall as an artist. But even back to when we spoke about your Instagram as far as your childhood, it's not very depictive, right? So what I would like to ask you is, how personal versus professional are you on social media?
That's a great question. I don't know. I feel like I've always, and it's funny you asked me that because coming in, my most distinct memory with social media was coming into high school. And I don't know what year, I'm assuming it's freshman year, but they had this assembly with us. And it was oh, beware what you post on social media because you can't ever take it back. And I don't know, that's always stuck with me. And it might also play into the fact that I've always been a goody two shoes, let somebody else tell it. But on social media, I've always been pretty professional in the sense of I've never cussed or anything. Now I can't speak on stuff that I share or retweet,
right?
But me personally, I try not to watch what I say as well as what I share because it is out there. No matter what we do, it's hard to get stuff scrubbed off the internet. But I don't know. I feel like I've been a mix of both. I don't mind sharing my personal, or in the past, I haven't had a problem with sharing my personal life because it was like some parts of it I felt were necessary to share, especially like going through college and like studying abroad, especially then because there wasn't that many people who looked like me doing it, and that was something that I looked for, you know, going into studying abroad, especially as a Black woman going to Europe. You know, you don't see a lot of us doing that per se, maybe traveling, but living there, completely different thing. So like I just remember like when I was there, I was more of an open book with just the stuff that was happening to me or around me. And you know, I definitely don't regret it in that instance for sure, because whenever I came back, people were coming up to me and they're like, oh, like girls I didn't even know, but like they might have followed me on social media and vice versa. And you know, they were like, oh, when you went there, did you have this thing or did you experience this? So I was like, okay, I don't mind sharing. So I don't know, I would say a mix of both.
Okay. So you mentioned studying abroad, and especially being somewhere else as a Black woman, a completely different place. Talk to me about some of the experiences. Were they positive? Were they negative?
All in all, they were positive in the sense of like I've always been fascinated with like different countries and different cultures, and you know, as a young girl, so like looking at, you know, the Eiffel Tower or the Parthenon and, you know, all these marvelous places and just being able to see them, you know, it was such a blessing to be able to have that experience, especially at such a young age. Like I think I'm 23 now, so I think I was like 20. Yeah, because I remember we were able to drink over there and I wasn't able to drink here. So yeah, I was 20. So it was definitely a blessing to be able to do that at such a young age and in such a pivotal time in my life, you know, college alone. So to have a semester away is like, oh, who wouldn't want to do that? Right. Especially coming from Kent. You know, Kent, there's nothing but Kent State. It's a country town. But it was a tough time being there and staying, whether it be like, oh, what am I going to do with my hair because there's nobody that braids hair here, or just the racism and the different ways it's expressed, you know, because I feel like in America we're so used to a certain type of racism. It's sad to say, but like in Europe, in certain parts of Europe, it also differs on, you know, depends on where you are, will determine on the treatment that you have and, you know, just how you look. And there were so many different complexities that kind of went into my time there. There were definitely moments where I wanted to come home, but I was like, you know what? I remember thinking, I'm like, if my grandparents and aunts and uncles can go
able
through,
to endure,
you know, civil rights and being called, you know, names, N-words and whatnot, you know, because that stuff did happen while I was over there. But I'm like, if they could go through that and still make it through and, you know, be successful, then why can't I? You know, I'm leaving. I don't have to stay here. So I would keep those things in mind a lot of the time while I was there. And I would also remember why I went. You know, I went there to study fashion. So that was what kept me going. But all in all, it was definitely a blessing. I would definitely go back. Like I'm dying to go back to Paris and Amsterdam. Amsterdam was really fun. The people were really nice there. So I would definitely go back. Oh, also Morocco. So being able to travel like that, that was probably my most favorite thing, because, you know, you got to go through so many hoops to travel here sometimes. Over there, you can just catch a train for $10 or 10 euros, and you're in a whole new country sometimes. So
that's nice. So I'm going to back us up a little bit. I kind of want to understand the cultivation of how you became an artist. So we'll start in childhood. What experiences in Jordan's childhood are most responsible for Jordan's character in adulthood? And have any of those been the catalyst to you becoming an artist?
Oh wow, that's such a layered question. Great one. Okay, so the moment that sticks out the most to me in my head from when I was a child was, you know, it could be as abstract as it was in person, but in my head, how I remember was, I was drawing on the wall. Like, I think fashion shows used to come on like E Network or Style Network. It's some channel. It doesn't come on anymore, long story short. I remember seeing a fashion show, and then like I caught myself drawing it with a brown crayon on the wall. And it was like two girls. It was like me and my cousin or something. And it was in my mom's room. So that always like was my, I guess, first fashion memory per se. And then like dressing up, my mom, she used to buy me the we used to have like these clear plastic heels that lit up and had fur and stuff on them. So I used to wear those all the time. Anything that was fashionable and girly, I just would attach myself to it. But in terms of getting my, like, the maker perspective, the artist perspective, I always like to experiment with things. So like if I saw something, I don't know, say lip gloss, I'm in the kitchen trying to figure out how to make lip gloss. It might not have been lip gloss, but I'm trying to make it, you know, I would always figure things out. You know, I would take things apart, or I would try to make it my own way, and we're going to say it's whatever it is, even though it might not be. I feel like in school is probably whenever I express my artistic side the most, because, or maybe at home, because at school it was more of a battle being an athlete. Because it was, you know, Woody High, it's like sports, or you're super smart, so you're going to go the super smart way, or you're artistic, so you're going to go the artistic way. But I'm like 3 ways. I'm like, I'm athletic, you know, I'm good at school, and then I love art. So, you know, anytime that I could take an art class, I would. And then those were a lot of the times where my mom, I remember my grandma even like, oh, Jay, I didn't know you could draw, you know, and I'm just drawing for our biology project, because they're like, oh, Jordan, you can draw better than we can. So I would say in those moments my artistic side came. But whenever I found out, or let's go back a little bit, I've always been into fashion. My grandma, she taught me how to sew. So that was something I've always done in the background, like through my childhood. Like one year I went to the academy, so we had to wear uniforms, and I used to sew bow ties to put on my uniform. I don't know, child, just to make it different. So I would just play around there, and then like we had home ec in 8th grade, and we sewed in that class, and then I just remember being a know-it-all, like, oh, I know how to sew, I know what I'm doing. And I remember I closed the pillow wrong, and my teacher wrote a note to me like, oh, I know you know how to sew, but you closed the pillow wrong. You know, so it was always there. And it probably wasn't until like my junior year of college, whenever I found out about Kent State, and like that, I mean, like I always knew I could go to school in New York, but I'm a hometown girl. Like I like to be home. And I'm like, New York, that's so jarring, you know, to go for college. I wasn't ready for that. But whenever I found out about Kent State, and that I could go for fashion, and then that is this bomb fashion school, I'm like, oh, sign me up. So there, I would say, is whenever the artist bag just exploded. You know, the bag was heavy then. But because I got to do all these different mediums, like I did things with textiles, and I learned how to work with Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop, and then of sewing, of course. And I was also painting there, you know, because in my design class, we learned how to do fashion illustration. That's something that I figured out I enjoy. But we had to do paint, you know, outside of the pencils and markers. So I don't know, I really got to open my eyes to see everything that I like to do and can do. I don't really pigeonhole myself into one, I guess, artist medium or type of artistry. I like to try anything, whether it's photography or, I don't know, cross stitching or basket weaving. I'm trying it, you know, I just like to be creative.
Okay. I'm gonna need you to slow down. You're answering all of my questions in one full. Look,
I don't know. I never did this before.
You're good. I'm happy you could talk though. Yeah. You make it a little easier.
I told you I talk when I'm talked to.
Okay. So you mentioned Woody High.
Yeah.
We both attended, and sometimes Woodland Hills can be a place where there's a lot of drama,
right,
and etc. And if I can read you well, you seem like the opposite of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you keep your sense of self in a building of 1,200 to 1,300 people with all these different personalities coming from different places? Yeah. Some are angry, some are happy, some are sad. How do you kind of maintain your sense of self?
Oh man, that's a great question. Again, I'm trying to think to who Jordan was during that time. I think, honestly, I kept to myself. You know, I knew what trouble was. I knew what trouble looked like. I've been in trouble before. I was afraid of what the repercussions were with trouble. So I think that I just kind of listened to my gut and those instincts. And sometimes trouble finds us and we can't, you know, we just got to do our best to get out of it. But I think I really did stay to myself and the people that around me that I knew who had my back and who I had their back. I definitely was busy, so I didn't have the time to necessarily be in drama, or like the stakes were higher because I ran track, I was in FBLA, all of these different clubs. So I'm like, if I get in trouble, she's out. Everybody's gonna be looking. And then that was the other thing. Like, there was plenty moments where I felt like there was eyes like all on me. With all these different hats at such a young age. That kind of kept me. That definitely kept me away from trouble. So I would say being involved and staying to myself and, my close group of friends that I had at the time. Yeah.
Okay. You attended Kent State. So there's usually, and you studied, what did you study again? What did you say you studied?
Fashion merchandise.
Fashion merchandise.
Design.
So anything, and this may just be my perspective, but there seems like there's a negative outlook on people attending school to pursue art or chef or things like that.
Yeah.
Was there any pressure for you to change your major, and how supportive was your family and people at Woodland Hills that helped us out getting into college? Like, were they supportive of what you wanted to do?
Oh, absolutely. Like my mom, she's always been supportive. Like, and my family, like growing up, that had a lot to do with my childhood. Again, like how I said, anything that I wanted to do, I would try to do it, whether I did it well or not. And, my mom would do the best she could to find the opportunity for me to do that. Or most times I was finding it and just telling her about it, and she'd be like, okay. So on that front, I had the support. In college or high school, definitely had the support in terms of getting there. They didn't know much about fashion. And arts. It's just academics, STEM, and athletics. And, if you got that on lock, great. So who was it? Mr. Luke and Miss D'Amico, like they definitely did the thing in terms of helping find the opportunities and the scholarships and giving the space to have those opportunities to do those things. I remember one time this lady came to our school. I forget what her name was. I think her name was Susan. I can't remember her last name. But she was in fashion, and that was like my only connect to somebody in the fashion industry. And she came to, I guess, talk to the students about if they wanted to be involved in that industry, I guess. And, I think it might have been me and 5 other people who went, and I think the appeal was, I think they gave out a H&M gift card for like the best dress, so the room was full. But I just remember being in that room, and she gave us like these packets, and I still have the packet to this day, and it just has like all these different careers and even how to pronounce some of these designer names, because I still butcher them, like, and I sometimes I don't say anything because I'm like, oh, I need that book. But I just remember that moment because that was like my only, I guess, hold on to fashion. And then they made sure we had it at our school. And just in terms of the support of being someone pursuing the arts, I could definitely see why the stigma is like, oh, you don't make money in the arts, because it can be tough, because it is a passion filled field, and it is subjective. So like if somebody thinks you're cool, then you're popping, your money's up, and then if you're out of trend, then things might look a little slow. But I think the way that the world's moving nowadays, artists don't have to be pigeonholed in those boxes. It's that they were once in back in the day, because we have social media and so many different media. Artists can put their art on clothes now. You don't have to just be a fine painter, fine arts painter. You can pivot in so many different directions, and having the access to like business knowledge. And that was something that I made sure that I had whenever I was in college with the marketing minor. So I think that makes a difference, because again, you have the marketing. You might want to go full-fledged marketing and keep the art as your passion project, or you might use the marketing in starting your own business, or you might just go full-fledged art. So I think that things are different, to where if you don't have the support at home per se, the places that you want to go can give you the support that you need.
Okay. Kent State seems like it's played a significant role in everything that you've accomplished, so far. So what's the journey like throughout college for you? Like, when do you figure out, like, okay, I'm good at this and I'm being given these different opportunities?
I think for me personally, it didn't come until my junior / because I did an extra year, so like my junior, senior-ish year, where I was like, okay, I can do this, you know. And I say that time because whenever I first came to Kent, I was majoring in fashion merchandising, realized that I'm like, okay, this is too businessy. I want to be more on the creative side. So then I went to design. And then I'm like, okay, I'm missing that business acumen that I was talking about earlier. I'm missing that aspect. So then I was doing both. COVID happened, long story short. I realized the way they wanted us to do design, I was like, I took my studio classes, I did drawing, you know, I did all that stuff. I think I'm good on my own. Around that time, I did the scholarship for Fashion Scholarship Fund. Virgil Abloh, he had it. It was the postmodern scholarship. So in that moment, I was like, okay, we're gonna have to figure out, I'm doing something. If I drop design, I need to do something that still keeps me in that design realm. And with that, I had to like make my own collection and case study, you know, basically a whole project encompassing my 4 years of knowledge was in this case study. So I think, and that wasn't until my junior year. And around that moment, I also did the fashion show, because I told myself, if I want to drop this design major, I have to stay in design somehow. I can't just fall off, because I remember I told my teacher, like a year prior to this, I was like, oh, I'm going to drop design, because I thought about it then. I was like, I'm dropping design. And she asked me, she was like, well, what are you going to do to you know, stay in it? And I told her, I'm gonna stay in there. I don't know how. So I just, you know, I'm like, I can't go back on my word, you know, even though she probably not thinking about that. But I told myself, I'm gonna do this case study and I'm gonna do this fashion show. And then to see the results of what I produced from both, whether, you know, they got the accolades or not, I was like, okay, I'm pleased that what I did, you know, the fruits of my labor, I'm pleased. So I think in that time is whenever I was like, okay, I know what I'm doing. It's all coming together.
Right? Coming full circle. The Fashion Scholarship Fund. Let's talk about that a little bit. Give the viewers some, you know, perspective about what it is, how you got it, who is behind it.
Oh, absolutely. So, where do we start? Okay, so Fashion Scholarship Fund. It was a scholarship. I would see it all the time. My time in Kent, you know, they would email us, oh, do this scholarship, but everybody knew it was a lot of work, because you have to do like a 20-slide presentation, you have to do market research, depending on what field you do, you have to create something. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing all that, I'm trying to graduate, you know. So then my friend Tashaya, or I call her Shy, she did it, and I'm like, and she won. So I'm like, oh my God, my sis, you know, I know this girl, I know this black girl. She won, and then she did it again, and then she won again, like she won the top prize. So I'm like, okay, I need to see what this is about. You know, my sis is over here winning, you know, let's see what's good. So I reached out, and I think I almost missed it, knowing me. I think I almost missed it, but the lady who facilitated it for our school was one of my old professors. So I was like, hey, is it too late? And she's like, no, I really think you should do it. So then I'm like, oh, okay, that's pressure if they're looking for me to do it. So we needed a mentor. I reached out to the professor that I was telling you about, that I told earlier that I was dropping my major. Her name's Dr. Tamika Ellington. I reached out to her. I was like, can you be my mentor? Because she was like the only black fashion school professor, and then she went to this other position in the College of the Arts. So I'm like, okay, I want you to be my mentor, because, you know, she was the one doing what I want to do in the future. So she's like, yeah, we're working together throughout the summer. It's a lot of work, especially the route that I chose, because you can take different disciplines, and I chose the fashion design discipline. And with that, I had to create a case study, a fashion collection surrounding, I think, the market trends of Gen Z consumers. So I just chose to focus on the black female Gen Z consumer in mind. And I made like my own concept shop for, you know, that I would sell my own products. And basically you had to create a whole framework around how you would sell whatever it is you're showing them. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll make my own e-commerce, whatever. And the inspiration that I chose for the project, because I was like, I've always wanted to see myself in fashion, and I also feel like fashion is a language to tell, people how we're feeling or what we agree with or who we align with. So that summer I was reading a book, I think it was called The Black Woman, an anthology by Toni Cade Bambara, I think that's what it's called. And in there, she was highlighting Shirley Chisholm in her campaign story, and just basically how she got to be in politics and just everything she went through. And her campaign slogan was unbought and unbossed. And I just remember I was sitting in the cafe and I was like, oh, this is deep, unbought and unbossed. And I had to sit and think like, well, what does that mean to me? Mm-hmm. So to me, that means, unbought, that means I'm not changing for anybody. There's no price for me to waive, like I'm not wavering in what I believe in, and unbossed is essentially that same side of that coin. So I was like, you know what? I want people to feel unbought and unbossed in my clothes. So that kind of was the tone for my collection. And I was like, okay, let's see. And I've always been someone involved in like retro fashion. So I just fused the two together. And then that's what the collection was. So I had to do I think it was like an 8-piece collection of different garments and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And I was so hesitant in even doing the scholarship because, again, it's a lot of work. And I submitted it, and then I remember telling my mom, I was like, you know what, even if I don't win, I'm cool. Like that moment earlier, I was like, I'm good. Like I see my work. Mm-hmm. So then, I don't know, like a month and a half later, I get a call, and they're like, oh, you won. And I'm like, oh my freaking gosh. Like I just start screaming, I'm in my room going crazy. And my mom, she's looking like, what's wrong? So I tell her, and she starts screaming too. And then I think she played, what's the song? If You Believe from The Wiz by Lena Horne. It was just a lot going on. So we're in the room crying, And then after that, I didn't realize how, it didn't really hit me how pivotal that moment was until probably I think we talked to Virgil after we won, and then just seeing all the other my peers and colleagues who were also the other, I think there was 20 of us, but just seeing all their faces and just I'm like, oh damn, I'm here. Oh, we made it. And ever since then it's just been it's just been abundance. I went to New York for the first time ever with Fashion Scholarship Fund, and the people that I've met and my other peers who won, they've just been so many cool personalities. I don't know, I'm like, why didn't I do this sooner? All those years of chickening out, but I think it was just, that was time, that was God's timing for me to do that scholarship when I did.
God rest his soul, you mentioned Virgil. Mm-hmm. What is that conversation like? What questions do you ask? What's the flow of it?
Oh my gosh. I'm just thinking the first chat we had with him after figuring out we won, it was on Zoom because, the pandemic. Right. And I just remember freaking out because at this time I started my brand, and I was freaking out. I'm like, I remember I got this hat sample, and I was like, I hate this hat. This is not what I asked for. It wasn't bad, but I'm that type, if it's not what I asked for, I don't see nothing else. Right. So I'm like, you know what, let me wear something for my brand, because we had our chat with Virgil, and I'm like, I'm sure he would want to see some streetwear, So I had my t-shirt on, and then I had the hat. And then he's like, hey, yo, that hat, I love that hat. And I'm in there oh, shoot, yo, he loves my hat. So I'm in there cheesing. So I'm like, I done forgot the question that I asked. But I think I remember asking him something regarding, what he would tell his young self back then. But I don't know, I can't remember. But he was just an open book. Anything that he wanted, anything that he knew that helped him, he wanted us to know. And he would make that clear every time. I just remember writing notes and notes and notes. And, oh, that's what it was. he told me to keep the t-shirts. Like, the t-shirts and jeans is what makes the money. Like, you know, that pays for all the fun stuff that you like to do. But the t-shirts is what, you know, that gives you the money.
Right.
People always want a t-shirt. They don't always want a extra long puffer that's dragging on the floor. So that, you know, those moments always speak to me. And then just to hear him passing, it just was like, it rocked my world. So I'm like, I know it rocked his family and, you know, all the people closest to him. Because even then, in those times, we didn't know he was sick. You know, he just was showing up as his best self. And he made it clear, like, how he wanted to help and wanted to change the narrative with fashion, especially how Black people are involved and influence fashion. Like, you can, despite the stuff, you know, in the media that, you know, was said about him with Off-White in early days and the controversy, because we're all aware, but he was definitely trying to make the change and just do what needed to be done. So, you know, in the future, people don't have to struggle in the ways that he did and that we had to coming into college, you know. So I see how he laid his hand and left his mark.
I'm happy you at least got to experience him, you know, especially as a fashion designer.
Right.
And he was on top of the world,
right.
you know, before he passed away. And, you know, his legacy will live on.
Absolutely.
But I'm just happy you got to speak with him.
Thank you.
Eric Emanuel. So that was the first thing I saw. I was like, really? Oh, shit. Like, what is...
Really?
Yeah, because my friend Anthony, shout out Perk, he's very into fashion. He has a brand. And he's into designer stuff. And I remember he would like buy Eric Emanuel shorts. He has an Eric Emanuel hat. I never was familiar with that just because I'm a plain. You know,
you like chilling. What you like.
Right. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's crazy. Like, how does she even orchestrate this? And then they were fly. It's not like you dropped some trash and it sold out, what you said, 18 minutes?
I think it was something like that. Look,
either way, it sold out.
People knew better. Like, my family knew faster than me, but something like that.
How does that happen?
Oh, fashion scholarship fund, like, point blank period. Like I said, I didn't know that they was about to change my life like that. I found out about it. Something else I wasn't about to do. That seems to be the theme. But I found out about it over the summer. They had like this email going around like, oh, there's this design challenge. Because honestly, I wasn't even hip to Eric Emanuel in the sense of I didn't know how poppin' he was until I was like, oh, LeBron had his stuff on, you know, because I would see it floating around, his EE logo, you know, floating around, but I didn't put two and two together. And it was another moment where I was like, you know what, I want to exercise my portfolio, you know, I want to build my portfolio, exercise my pattern making skills, because like in my brand, that's something that I've always been inspired by, is like different types of patterns and colors. So I'm like, you know what, why not?
Right.
So I remember drawing the design last minute, like I don't even know, it might have been like the week before it was due. And then I sent the video in, because we had to give like a video
explanation.
Yeah, I'm like, let me throw on a hat, throw on another hat. Then I sent the video, like I think maybe a few hours before it was due, because there was a time zone thing. And I was like, okay, we're just going to hope for the best and whatever. Peter, the director for FSF, he called me. He was like, oh, I was leaving the gym and I'm all out of breath. I'm in the car. I'm like, New York. Peter, he's like, oh, I wanted to call you first before you saw it on social media, but out of all the people we've looked at for the shorts, we've picked your design to be one of the few chosen. And I'm like, another screaming moment. I'm like, oh my God, I'm in the car like freaking out. And he was like, yeah, we were so excited, and just I think they said something like, oh, we looked and we just knew, we had a feeling that your shorts were going to be one of the ones. And I'm like, oh wow, I didn't even think, you know, especially the colorway that they picked. I like warm colorways and stuff, like orange and stuff, but then they picked the I think it was like the olive green and the pink, and I was like, oh, okay.
That's crazy.
So then after that, they were like, oh, can you come to New York? And I'm like, damn. At first I was going to say no, but because I was supposed to go to Afropunk with my friends. But then I'm like, I've never been in New York at that point. I'm like, if I don't go to New York for this, to see a launch for my shorts, then what do I go to New York for? So I'm like, okay, I'm coming. So I've changed my plans. You know, I told my friends I'll see y'all the next day in Atlanta. You know, I just got to go to New York. And I'm in there, I'm on the plane cheesing. Felt like first day of school, I had all my, my loved one stuff on. And then I just walk in the store. It was like an anxiety moment, but I just walked in. I don't think I was supposed to walk in because they were like, oh shoot, we didn't even know. You just walked in, So I was like, I didn't know what else to do. And Eric, he had on my shorts because he's like, oh, these were my favorite ones. And I wanted to cry in that moment. Like, I was like,
that's a blessing.
That's all I needed.
Especially
at that
you
point.
Submitting it.
Yeah.
It was a week before. That's crazy.
Yeah. So that was that. That was a blessing. And then I met up with my girlfriend, and she kind of captured the whole moment. My friend Tashaya, because she lives out there. But yeah, I wouldn't have had it any other way.
That's crazy that happened for you like that. So with myself, there's a lot that I want to accomplish in my life, but a lot of my desires have been kind of influenced by what I've been able to accomplish so far. So when I just wanted to be successful at 18, 17, I never knew that I would write a book. But when I did, it raised the ceiling of the success I wanted to attain. Yep. So when you do something like that with Eric Emanuel, does it raise the ceiling of what you believe you can accomplish?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I would be a fool to not, or I would do a disservice to the childhood me, because like I just remember being young and looking in these fashion magazines, and I'm like, oh, if I'm going to go to New York, it's going to be for fashion, whether I'm modeling or something, it's going to be for fashion. And to see like, wow, I'm doing, even if things don't go how I want them to go, I'm doing everything that the young me would want to happen, like going to fashion school or designing clothes, whether they're on a celebrity or not, it's a passion. So I would say so, and I think it also widens what I'm capable of, whether it be on that Eric Emanuel scale or whether it be on a local individual out in my bedroom scale. It's just shows me that I can do anything that I put my mind to.
Okay.
And hopefully it shows other people and other girls who look like me the same.
Okay. That's dope. Your clothing brand. So I need to know the name and the creative process and thought that went into executing it.
Okay. So the name is A Loved One. The name came from, I had this chalkboard in my room, and I don't even know why I wrote it, but like I wrote A Loved One, but one was spelled out on there, and I just had it hanging up in my room for like the longest, and it didn't really resonate until like, I don't know, a few years ago. Sometimes you got to go through things.
Right, life got a life.
Yeah, life got a life. Life be lifing. And like wisdom is something that they always say, you might not need it in that moment, but you'll need it at some point.
Right.
And I think those words were the wisdom that I needed at that time. And whenever I started the brand, the space that I was in, at least spiritually, was one of like a rebirth. And I wanted to start something new. Like I felt very stagnant. I was thinking about like, okay, I'm about to graduate, COVID's happening, whatever. What am I going to do? What am I going to produce, being that I'm not in fashion design where you're constantly producing? I've always wanted to start my own brand. I've had the solitude and the forced isolation to do so. I don't have all these external triggers and distractions, and just life. It's not coming at me as hard. God, that was a blessing too. So that's whenever I started everything. And then just like the overall brand aesthetic, I think it's just me. Like I've always been attracted to color. Pattern is something that I mentioned earlier. That's what got me with the Eric Emanuel project. But I just use my brand as a way to express those creative talents. Like I said earlier, that I just, if I want to try something, I'll just try it through my brand. And the thought process, a lot of the pieces are random. I find that I work backwards. Like I'm the type that if I see something, I'm going to make it from what I see. Like if I see a fabric, I'm like, okay, I love that fabric. I know I want something out of that fabric. I don't know what, but something's going to be out of that fabric. Some designers, they kind of sketch.
They have an idea and it's like, I'll just use that for this. Okay.
And some stuff, don't get me wrong, some things I do have that approach. But like when it's just like bags and accessories and whatnot, I kind of just let my creativity roam. My ethos around my brand is, we're all a loved one, whether God loves us. That's truly what I believe. Somebody loves us. If nobody else does, He does. And we love ourselves. At least that's what I want to encourage and, hope that people strive towards. And in that, a lot of my pieces are one of a kind, like us, because we're all one of a kind individuals, or they're limited edition. Because we all have limited edition personalities, and outside of like my logo T-shirts, you can get as many as you want of those. But like the handmade things, I try to keep those one of a kind, because it just keeps the creative integrity, in my opinion. And also, it's a slow fashion brand, so I do everything myself. I screen print everything. I design everything. My people, actually, let me not say everything myself. My family, they actually do help me. They'll help me assemble some of the pieces and put tags on things. But in terms of the creative energy, I do all that. I'm trying to figure out how that will work in the long run. But so far, so good. Being that I'm working locally, it works in my favor. But yeah, a loved one is just a conglomerate of my creative expression, whether it be through tie-dye or through hats or through bags.
Okay, you mentioned words like love, personality, right, which are things that are very attached to human nature and who we are as a people. And it seems like a positive outlook on the way you decide to express fashion through people. But how do you do you ever try to convey the negativity that's going on in our world, but you use it in a fashion sense?
That's a great question. I've actually been thinking about that thought, because lately I've taken a step back from my brand. I'm sure people can tell, because I had to sit back and think of like, okay, a loved one, self-love. And I was thinking, like, there's times where I'm like, I don't love myself right now. I'm not loving her. That's not that girl right now. And it would be wrong to deny that feeling, because that's a part of who we are. Right. And I have been thinking about, like, how can I address this in a way that is not depressing, but is real.
It's truth.
Because this is real. A loved one is real. The love is real, but the times that we're not feeling that are just as real. So, that is something that I have been keeping in mind. And, like I said, I kind of took a step back, because I didn't know how to really convey that, especially being that I was like, I'm not feeling in the space to create, and that's also creativity is a feeling for me, like it's an action. So whenever I'm not feeling it, it's hard for me to act upon it. And, that kind of ties into the self-love, because, my business is my passion. So it's like whenever you don't want to do that's like your passion, it's like, ugh.
Slippery slope.
And that is that, slippery slope, double-edged sword. So I don't know. I think I do want to explore how to address that, visually. I can't say it'll come out in my next collection, because that's kind of already in the thing. But I have been,
thinking
dealing
about
with that thought.
Okay.
So that's a sign that you said that now.
So you mentioned limited edition, right? I listen to certain things, and certain things stick out to me. So you mentioned limited edition, and I see these pieces, and I would say you have a constant stream of ideas. So some days I look at your page and it's like, oh, she can be a fashion designer. Then other days it's like, oh, I see streetwear, right? And Gucci wouldn't put a $5 product on their website because it contradicts the price of luxury story. So where do you plan to position your brand on the ladder of fashion?
Oh, that's another great question. So keeping in mind what Virgil said about the T-shirts and the jeans, and I think that those pieces are an important part of the brand positioning for that, so people can have access to, if it's Gucci, a Gucci T-shirt or a Hanes T-shirt, that gives a certain demographic access. So I think with me keeping those items, that's something that, you're always going to get those at a reasonable price. Now, the handmade things, that is something that I also keep in mind with who I sell to. Because I try to sell to me. I like to pay for quality. I like to pay for things that are different, but I also like to keep it reasonable price. So to honor the handmade nature of things, that's something like those pieces are on the more higher end. But even with the handmade things that I do make, every bag isn't like one bag was like $100, but I have some that are 60. You know, it might be smaller, but it's different. Right. And you know, as I add more pieces and I guess silhouettes, I guess you could say, the price point will waver to. Yeah, I won't say it's like going to be in like the luxury demographic. I think it's just going to have a broader range of, if you want a more luxe product, you can get this. If you just want a more entry level, just I want to support my sis, you can get the bag or a bracelet. So get in where you fit in.
I can usually tell when an artist starts a clothing brand versus when someone who just likes clothes starts a clothing brand. And I feel like you encompass the word artist, right? So it's kind of like Kendrick Lamar is great at so much more than music that it elevates his ability to create music. So have you always been good at just doing different things?
According to my mom, yes. According to me, I don't know. But again, like I've always liked to try something new, and I guess you could say that because I'm just like a perfectionist. So that perfectionist in me won't let me do something until it's great. Or maybe y'all just don't see the stuff that I'm not great at. I don't know, maybe it's a mix of both. But I will say that I think my knowledge and interest in different mediums, whether it be art or just history of art or just influences, does act as a benefit, because I do see those differences too. But I will say in those people, I admire their tenacity to, regardless if they know fashion or not, they gonna start a clothing brand. Whereas somebody like me who knows too much might be like, oh, I'm not doing that. You know, because sometimes when you know too much, it keeps you from what you want. So to say, long story short, yes.
Unbought and unbossed. I wanted to get to that earlier, but we had so much, so much in between, so much traffic. I came up with this idea whenever I was just looking over your page, right? So a company reaches out to you. Do you have a favorite fashion brand, luxury or streetwear?
I would say that the one that just popped into my head, I would say Le Double J, and a lot of people probably don't know who that is, but it's okay. I just love their it's a haute couture brand. They're more on like the I can't afford it yet end. But they use a lot of bold patterns and simple silhouettes. Like the patterns make the clothes. I would say Stella Jean is also one of my favorite designers. Like you could probably even tell maybe her influence in some of my work, because she uses a lot of wax prints to honor her heritage. I think she's Haitian, or she uses a lot of African influences because she's Haitian as well as Italian. So I love how she mixes both of her cultures in her design. So I would say those are the top two that pop up. And then Pierre Moss, of course, I just love how he conceptualizes the culture into his work. And then, you know, I have my favorite artists like Kehinde Wiley, Jeff Koons, Jean-Michel Basquiat, but who doesn't love him? Andy Warhol. I just love anything graphic, bold, colorful, Afrocentric, you know, anything that speaks to me in those, like those are my languages. So
Pierre Moss is Black owned, right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Great. So Pierre Moss reaches out to you. Hey Jordan, we love your work and we would love for you to come work with us under the condition that we buy your brand for, let's say, $1 million, right? We buy your brand and you can never sell anything else under that. But it can be incorporated into our stuff. And you come work for us, I don't know what fashion designers make, but let's say $500,000 a year. Like, we'll fly you out here to the office, we'll get you a place, but we want to buy your brand. What do you say?
Ooh, wow. See, I would have a few questions following up, like, do I have stake in this brand? Is this a one-time payment? Am I getting a cash flow? Do I have creative directing influence? Am I going to be like Anna Wintour sitting up for decades as the, you know, where am I?
Right.
So, but I don't know. That's a great question, because honestly, a loved one is a message. It's a message greater than me. And like what I wanted to represent overall. And I mean, like if Pierre Moss did contact me, given what he represents as a brand, I'd probably say yeah, you know, but I would have those questions in between.
I'm just happy you got questions.
Yeah, because I want to know, like, is this $1 million it? Because that's not a lot of money, you know. I want to know, do I have stake, stocks, you know, and I don't know. I would have questions, but I think I would be open to it, given what he stands for.
Well, that's good. I'm just happy you have questions. Yeah. It's just like, I'll take the money.
No. So
okay, that's good.
We're going to put an asterisk next to that.
Hopefully we manifesting something right now. But 2 questions for you. So being that you're an artist, I understand how sometimes you see through that perspective. So like I'm interested in marketing. So when I see a product, I don't really see a product. I see like, okay, who is this being sold to? What can we do to sell it? Things like that. When you're out in the world, how often is your artist brain turned on? And then how do you give yourself those breaks when you just like, let me just be a person today?
Oh, Lordy. Okay, so at my job, I'm a buyer. And one of the tenets of being a buyer is you don't buy for you, you buy for the consumer. So in my buying process, I have a lot of input in like what goes on the clothes. And who I'm buying for, they're boring. Like, let's just keep it, you know, simple. The consumer's boring. I like stuff out there. So my artist brain is like, oh, this would be cool if we do this, da-da-da-da. But then my boss is like, boring customer. So then I have to turn it off. So I would say pretty much every day is a artist brain moment, because I could look at something and I'm like, oh, move that to the right. And then that's a nice beignet of, you know, somebody could take a picture right there. But I think in the moments that I turn it off would probably be, probably sleep. Even scrolling social media. Like, I even had to take a break from Instagram because it was just too many inspiring things coming at me at once to where I'm like, I'm not even using these things that I was inspired off of a month ago. So I have to deliberately take myself out of those moments and spaces sometimes. But now I'm trying to go back in it because life's boring without art.
Okay, I want to separate Jordan from a loved one.
Yes.
Tell me the vision that you have for yourself in the next 1, 2, 3 years, and the vision that you have for your brand.
Okay. Vision for myself definitely is graduate school. You know, I want to pursue higher education in that way. I've always seen myself doing that. I never really saw myself stopping at like my bachelor's, so I'm like, wow, I might as well while I'm young. I definitely want to be more independent in terms of moving on my own. You know, I'm like, okay, I graduated college. Let me spring the nest a little bit. So hopefully that's in my cards within the next 2 years. Those are my main things. Definitely travel. Hopefully find some more cool vintage clothes. I don't know. But the main things are graduate and, you know, move on my own.
Okay.
And then for my brand, I would like to have my brand in a store, whether it be local or whatever. I would like it in a store somewhere. I would also like to, a goal of mine under my brand is to open up my product assortment and also get some more of like my handmade pieces in terms of clothing, you know, involved in the mix somewhere. And just more experimentation and learning. Those are my main things.
I think we're close to an hour.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Though.
Been running my mouth.
But I had a lot of fun talking to you.
Likewise.
It was a pleasure having you today.
Likewise. Thank you.
I do this with all my guests, but I want to tell you I'm proud of everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
Everything that you've accomplished. You inspire me.
Thank you.
Especially going to Woody High. So,
I know. I tell people all the time, Woodland Hills, like,
we got some great people doing great things.
People. Like, there was a time I had a photo shoot and literally all of us were Woodland Hills, like the models, the photographer, the people standing around. Like, it was all Woody High, and I was like, wow, we're really doing some great things, despite what people try and say. We're giving us, you know, our pats on the back.
All right. Miles and Kobe, I need y'all on here. Y'all the first 2 people I thought of when it came to Woodland Hills. So if you're watching this, I need you on. Come join me. We can have a great conversation. But yeah, I wanted to congratulate you.
Thank you.
And tell you to continue to, you know, burn through your path.
Thank you.
You're doing a great job. And, you know, I appreciate you coming up.
Like, you over here writing books.
If I had a hat, I'd tip it to myself. But you want to give your website or your Instagram name or anything to the people watching?
Oh, yes. So you can find me personally at Jordan Michael on Instagram, JordanMikhal. And my brand is A Loved One. So a.loved, Loved, .1, number 1 on Instagram. And then my website is alovedonebrand.com. And you can find everything that you see on the table here on my brand, and you can find me on Instagram.
Y'all know where to find me already. I ain't got to shout myself out. But thank you for tuning in to another episode of Untitled, episode 5. I'm your host, Juwan. We had a great guest, Jordan, and we'll be back soon with more content. It's a wrap.